Yeah, but like, I'm gonna, yeah. Can you put stories?
Double years ago. Okay, open it. So it's just drop this side of here.
You have to go in our story.
See what's one of the greatest games ever
Does that mean
created.
mute the story or does it? You can mute the story or the story numbers.
Okay. Okay.
Thursday.
Okay, since I have a couple of minutes, I'm just going to randomly call names to see if I can make connections in my head. Avi Pratyush. Okay. Okay. Matteo Bergsagal. Matteo Bergsagal. Okay. Michael Buchikian. Okay. Michael Bayer. Ross Douglas. Ross Douglas. Courtney Dozier. Joshua Elkins. Emilia Ferreira. Lin Feng Guo. Daniel Su. Matthew Jurenka. Ninad Kulkarni. Narasimha Lakamsani. Sri Harsha Lakamsani. Lee Vincent. Kang Ji Lim. Denis Lu, Cristobal Lizarraga, that's it. Shena Mallet, Ethan Moore, Jack Myers, Nicholas Ngo. How do you say your last name?
No.
No, okay, Nicholas, no. Okay, good. Tara Paranjpe. See, you see, I say the Indian names quite well. Somehow I just figured that out. Joshua Parthe, Devansh Patel, Marco Pimentel.
I go by Dion.
What?
You go by Dion if that's it.
Dion. Okay. Roth Ryder. She Derek. Andrew Smith. Andrew Tang. Andrew Tang. Cameron Oler. Cameron Oler. Kenna Zimmerman. Okay. So let me just check again. Matteo Bergsagal. Matteo Bergsagal. Douglas Ross. These are the ones I missed earlier. Emilia Ferreira. Okay. Daniel Su. Anybody here whose name I didn't call? Okay. What's your name?
Andrew?
What?
Andrew?
Andrew Tang?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good. So today we're going to do A-star search. There was a time when in AI, what separated quote unquote AI from bunch of other areas such as pattern recognition, computer vision, language processing, etc., is whether or not you knew A-star search. Okay, that's not exactly the case right now. It's one of the many things that you want to know, but certainly A-star search is the way you could tell whether you're taken intro to AI. So that's like a big deal at some level. So what I am planning to do is basically all things A-star search. After today's class, we are done with A-star search, and we'll move on to adversarial search, game tree search. So we'll do example, proof of optimality, bunch of things like informedness of heuristics, some important second order ideas like consistency and monotonicity. It should be one single word, monotonicity. And then also where we get heuristics from relaxations. And this is quite relevant. Much of this discussion today, as well as last class, is quite relevant for the project 1 that's going to be released right after the class or something today, and it'll be due 2 weeks from now, okay? And it's kind of, and again, please, for the project 1, we are trying to do it as 2 weeks, but I would like to see if people are having trouble getting used to the environment. It's the Pacman environment, and you get to see visualizations of your search algorithm, et cetera, a little bit. But if you're having trouble, you have to let us know beforehand. You have, there's a bunch of things that need to be completed. So you need to pace yourself and make sure that you are making progress. Don't try to start it at the end of the second week. Close to the end of the second week. But if you're having trouble, and if you give us an idea as to the class progress is slow or something, we will try to figure out, whether to do additional whatever registration session sort of thing, or to extend the deadlines, etc. In the past, for non-honors class, we would split this into a longer project into 2 parts. I'm just trying to see if you guys can do it in, as a single project in 2 weeks. If you can, then we can do other things. Essentially, we'll have more time for other things. Okay, so that's basically what's coming up. Yeah. And then a couple of things I want you to remember. These are sort of important in the sense people will slowly realize this. One important thing is search algorithms really don't search for states. Even though we acted as if looking for the goal state, right? That is actually a bad metaphor. What they're searching for is the path to the goal state. They are searching for the optimal path to the goal state. So essentially the path being, you are in some initial state, what action should you do and what will be the next state? What action should you do? What action should you do? Such that you will get to the goal. And the costs of all these actions are added up and you're minimizing that. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in particular, if I show you a graph and say, how do you go from the start to goal? You say, here's the goal. That doesn't work. Everybody can see where the goal is. I mean, at least in the pictures that you draw. But in general, what the algorithm is trying to figure out is not to just give you a state that satisfies the goal property, but give you a means of going from where it is to a state which satisfies the goal property. So it is finding the goal, but it's actually finding the optimal path to the goal. So this is actually important because that idea generalizes. So here is the start, and because you are in the deterministic world, when you do actions, you essentially get a linear behavior. By the way, the word behavior is nothing but sequence of states you go through. It's a fancy word, but think of behavior as sequence of states you go through. It's a very general description. Do you see what I'm saying? So essentially what you're trying to do, what A** search is trying to do is compute the optimal behavior, where the behavior's cost is the adding up all the actions. And the behavior ends when it reaches a goal state. So it's very useful to remember this, that A* search, and in fact, all the searches that you have seen till now actually search for paths to the goal. So in essence, they're searching in the space of paths. Searching in the space of paths. And that metaphor is extremely useful. There is actually a different kind of search called iterative search, where the path doesn't matter. I just give you a goal state description, and you just need to get me the goal state. Do you see what I'm saying? So an example of that is, if I have a chessboard, right? And I need to put, how queens work in the chess, right? The queens basically conflict if they're in the same diagonal or in the same column or same row. So if I ask you to put 2 queens on the chessboard such that they are not conflicting, you can do that. 3, you can do it. The question is, I want you to put 8 queens on a chessboard such that they're not conflicting. Do you understand what I'm saying? Their path is not the issue, because after all, any reasonable way of thinking about the problem, you need to pick the queen and put it on one of the cells. Before doing it, you have to figure out which 8 cells on the chessboard are such that if you put 8 queens on those 8 cells, no pair of them would be conflicting. For a problem like that, I don't care about path. I just care about finding, give me the goal state. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's actually, this iterative search is also similar. So this is basically, so we are doing path search right now. And path search is behavior optimization. And it's a very powerful idea. You will come back to it when you do reinforcement learning, you do Markov decision processes. Essentially, there also you are optimizing the behavior. So this way of thinking about it, you'll realize A-star search is basically in the family of algorithms, including MDPs and reinforcement learning. On the other hand, iterative search is in the different family of algorithms where just show me the state that has the property. Just show me the state that has the property. And you should be able to prove that if somebody were to give you an 8-queen solution, you can quickly check whether or not it is a solution. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because anybody can check if a pair of queens are conflicting. Coming up with an 8-queen solution is harder. But if I give you a solution, you can check whether it is a solution or not. A related thing for iterative search that we will get back to, it also has the word search in it, is if I have a continuous function, I want to find its maximum value, or I want to find its minimum value. There I just tell me what the maximum value of the function is, minimum value of the function is. It doesn't matter where you are right now. It's just tell me where the maximum is, where the minimum is. And you have done in calculus, from your grade school calculus, from high school calculus, you know that if you need to find optimal values, you can always take the derivative of the function, equate it to 0. All the places the derivative is 0 are potentially what I call, I think there's a name for it, the singular points, I believe. Okay, basically these are the places where the derivative is 0, and some of them would be local minima, some of them will be local maxima, some of them would be saddle points. Do you see what I'm saying? So in fact, this derivative is going to be 0. This point derivative is going to be 0. This curve, this point derivative is going to be 0. And by the way, that curve is like x cubed, if you look at. So when you do function optimization, you're essentially doing iterative search. So the textbook actually has a bunch of description after the path search about iterative search and hill climbing. I will not do it right now. I will do hill climbing with the continuous functions, because continuous functions are the only way you can do. Gradient descent is a hill climbing search or hill descending search, where the gradient tells you the steepest direction in which to take the step. So this is basically like giving you like a bigger overview of where we are. What we are doing today is path search, where you actually care about the length of the path that got you to the goal. It's not just enough to say, here's a goal node. Okay? And if you have to give the optimal length, that's where all the proofs and everything that we care about. Sometimes you just basically say, give me a node which has the property, this particular property. And that will be like 8 queens problem in the discrete scenario. 8 queens, and there are many other problems in the discrete scenario. And any continuous function approximation in the continuous scenario. They're all called search, but what are you searching for matters. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, it's a very useful thing to remember, this part. Okay, so let's go further. So last time we were in the uniform cost search, we talked about it, and we talked about the fact that you now have the open list essentially prioritized in terms of increasing G values, where G is the cost from the start node to that particular node. So you add up all the actions you have, add up the costs of all the actions you have taken. Remember, I say actions, but what you see in the graph is edges. What we are doing is an abstraction. The actual intelligent agent has specific actions. Your Pac-Man will have actions. But you can write the algorithm without thinking about all the specifics of the problem in terms of this abstraction of is a graph with nodes or vertices corresponding to the states of the world and edges corresponding to the actions. And since we are in deterministic worlds, when you do an action, you actually, if you're in a state, you do an action, you go to exactly one more state, not a possibly multiple different states. So if you want to draw a graph when you have actions that have uncertain outcomes, do you know what kind of a graph you will get? You understand what I'm saying? So essentially, if I have a situation where I'm in A, and if I do action O, then I can go to either B or C. Maybe this is with 0.9 probability, this with 0.1 probability. How do I draw these kinds of graphs? Normal graphs. Those would be essentially hypergraphs. Now, hypergraphs are graphs where edges are between sets of nodes rather than just pair of nodes. For deterministic case, really, you just think in terms of graphs, that's how we got into this. I mean, it's a very reasonable question that somebody asked. I thought I came to this class to do intelligent agents. How come you're just telling me 310 graph search again? Well, ultimately, everything you do in computer science is assembly language code being implemented on some machine. The question is one of abstractions. There are different levels of abstractions that you would use. And so it turns out that the search can be, deterministic search can be thought of as a graph search. And that's a very useful metaphor. And we talked about the fact that the open list is basically prioritized in terms of F value, in terms of G value. And G value is the cumulative cost of actions that you took to get to them. Okay? And then we basically said there's a way of generalizing this, which is to do A star search, where a node is now not being just prioritized in terms of its G value, but in terms of its F value, where F is G, which is how much effort did you spend to get to this node, how much did you travel to get to this node, and H is an estimate of how much more do you have to go to the nearest goal node. So H is an estimate. If H is a perfect estimate, it will tell you exactly the closest goal. If it is an imperfect estimate, there can be two ways. One is, so there is basically H star, and the imperfect estimate is not exactly equal to H star. So it can be, because it's a real number, because it's a distance, given two numbers, they can only have three properties, three possible relations. The first number is either less than the second number, greater than the second number, or equal to the second number. That's it, because it's a real number. So when I said estimate, the question then is, my estimate H, is it below H star or above H star? And what we basically argued, and I think we will try to prove today, is that 0 is actually what you did with uniform cost search. Even though uniform cost search did open list in terms of just G value, you can say it is doing it in terms of F value, where just H happens to be always 0. So uniform cost search, you agreed, actually I didn't prove, but you sort of agreed, although I will prove today again, is optimal. So it knows that, that this side of H star, if you can always be on this side of H star, qualitatively it looks like you will be optimal. If you cross H star, you won't be optimal. You see what I'm saying? And the classic way of remembering this is, if uniform cost search is 0, which is always less than the distance, H star, because 0 is the smallest distance. Negative distances don't exist. So 0 side is basically, uniform cost search is admissible, so between 0 and H star is admissible. above H star, what is the maximum value I can be far away from H star? What? Infinite. If I assume that my heuristic is infinite everywhere, what happens?
Never gonna get there.
No, it's very interesting. If you assume that the heuristic is infinite, the search will get done, like right then. So you start the search, it's done. Right? Okay? Because every path is infinite cost. So the search basically right away gets done and says, sorry, no go. So it's incomplete and it's also inoptimal. So that's a classic way of remembering. Infinity is what you really would like to do to get done fast. You know, if I ask you to do something, here is actually a very good metaphor to keep in mind. What is the thing that I should do to make you work as hard as you can on this course? If I give you extremely hard projects, you will realize after 2 weeks that this is not going to go anywhere. I'll get an F in this course, I'll withdraw from this course, I'll just stop working on this. In some sense, you're done with this course very fast. In optimal, you're not getting a good grade, but you got done fast. Do you see what I'm saying? What I need to do is come up with problems that make it look like you can solve them, and so you keep spending time. Do you understand what I'm saying? So infinite basically means everything is impossible to do. If everything is impossible to do, why am I taking this course? Why don't I do some other course? It's the same thing for search. If you put H equal to infinity, search gets done very fast. But it's inoptimal. It's incomplete because it doesn't care whether there are goals or not, because it's just basically giving up like right away. So, do you see what I'm saying? So the less than H star is the optimal case. And so the question, of course, then is if you have a heuristic, that everywhere for every node gives an estimate to the goal node, that is optimistic. That means it says it's actually less than what it really is, less than or equal to what it really is. 0 is like the most optimistic estimate. Like if I'm trying to get you on top of some, you know, some like the half dome, okay? You walk for a while, you give up. You say, it looks like it's done, I just can't walk. You say, how long do I have to walk? This is what you ask. I say, oh, just a little bit more. If I keep saying it's a little bit more, essentially I'm being very optimistic in my estimates. And then you keep going. Whereas if you ask, how long do I have to walk? I say, you'll never be able to finish it in your lifetime. You'll say, okay, fine, thank you. Here is my car, I will get in and go home. That's H equal to infinity. Okay, but obviously, the issue is that for every node in the graph, the heuristic is a function that tells you how far that search state is from the nearest goal state. And it should say it faster than the full search. In fact, here is a way you can compute H star, which is for every node you want H star, you do uniform cost search from below it, find the optimal goal path, use that as the cost to go. In fact, heuristics, by the way, are called cost to go. How much more cost is left? You can get the perfect estimate by doing search under each node. That will be giving you optimality. But it's a dumb idea because you're doing more work. All you needed is the optimal path from start to goal. Now I said to do that, you will have to find optimal path from every node to goal node. And then you can easily find the optimal path from start to goal node, of course. But that's unnecessarily costly. So somewhere in between is the good heuristics. Between 0 and H star are the good heuristics. And where you get those heuristics is by the right level of abstraction of the original problem. If you remember from the readings, the 8 puzzle problem, you could do 2 kinds of abstractions you looked at. One is assume that blank can travel from anywhere to anywhere. And so that's one idea, okay? The other idea is that blank can only travel step by step by step. It's like it basically can only go one step at a time. And that would be essentially Manhattan distance. And the number of misplaced tiles versus Manhattan distance heuristics are two different heuristics. Manhattan distance is more closer to H star, because number of misplaced tiles will never be bigger than Manhattan, the sum of Manhattan distances of each tile from its real place. Do you see what I'm saying? So the trick is to find heuristics that are closer to H star without spending too much time. So in fact, I'll show you in a minute, maybe I'll do it first now. Actually, let me see if I can do that. Sorry. Actually, I just want to show this. I mentioned this. I have to go all the way back now. But let me show you anyway. Wow. This is not even the one. Okay. Actually, since I'm here, no, let me just show you the one that I wanted to show you, and I have to come back. Okay, this is my picture. This is a very important picture. Since we're talking about it, let me talk about this. It is the cost that on the x-axis are the different kinds of heuristics for the problem. They're all admissible. Some take more time to compute than others. Okay? On the y-axis is the time taken for computing those heuristics. And the other curve is if you compute that heuristic, how much time do you spend on just the search? It's not surprising that if you have the smartest, richest uncle who gave you the H star for a problem, how much time would you spend to go to the goal node? You will only expand the nodes from the start node to the nearest goal node to the start node, whoever is on that path. So if the best goal node is depth d away from the start node, you will expand exactly d nodes. D nodes. Remember what the blind search was doing? It was also doing something to do with d, but it was doing b power d nodes expansion. B power d to d is night and day difference. It's not even night and day really. It's like it's a completely, one is exponential, one is linear. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you compute H star, to compute H star, you will spend a lot of time. But with respect to H star, the amount of search left to do is much less. So, but what are you really trying to do? You're trying to reduce the total amount of search time. Because if you don't have rich uncles, then you are computing the heuristic yourself, you're computing the search also, doing the search also yourself. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to do, what you're looking for essentially is adding up these two curves. If you add up those two curves, you get something like that. It winds up being minimum somewhere in the middle. And figuring out the best heuristics, which is very different from figuring out heuristics that will give optimal solution, because all these heuristics will give optimal solution. Anything that's less than H star will give you optimal solution. Figuring out the best heuristic essentially involves figuring out where that minimum point is. And it's not at all clear. In fact, for 8 puzzle problem, for the longest time in AI, what they would do is they would essentially look for, there was a general assumption that you have to have heuristics that are extremely easy to compute. That means they were somehow assuming that this minimum occurs in this region, where there are cheaper heuristics. That was just a meta assumption. Nobody really knew that for sure. What people found is if you actually use much costlier heuristics, the total search can reduce. Since I got you all the way here, let me go to the next one, if I can. Yeah. This is actually something that the textbook mentions only in passing. You know, everybody who does intro to AI understands for 8 puzzle problem, the number of misplaced tiles, the sum of Manhattan distances of misplaced tiles. And we'll spend a lot of time trying to explain to you that, okay, misplaced tiles, number of misplaced tiles always is a smaller number than the sum of Manhattan distances. Because of which it's quote unquote more informed heuristic. It winds up doing lesser number of node expansions. So H star does only D expansions. H equal to 0 does B power D expansions. In between are heuristics that do less than B power D, but more than D expansions. Do you get my point? Okay, so people basically were thinking that all you really have to talk about is these two heuristics, the misplaced and Manhattan summation heuristic. And they both, in the picture that I showed you earlier, they both would be relatively cheapo heuristics. They will be in this region because they're very easy to compute. But the problem is when you compute a cheap heuristic, the search with that can still be taking a long time. H equal to 0 is the cheapest heuristic anybody can give. Because it's always 0. There's no computation. The question is, and also I already told you the other extreme dumb idea, which is get the H star for every node, which is for every node under that node, do an optimal search using uniform cost search and find the H star. Just to say I've done it. In fact, it's not as dumb as you might think. If you are stuck with the same graph for next 30 years, and people will keep on asking you to find optimal paths on that graph for any pair of nodes, I'll pair shortest path. In essence, in that case, you will essentially compute H star and remember. It's a question of amortizing the cost. You guys know the word amortization. So amortization basically means if you're just solving one problem, it's a dumb idea to compute H star and then try to solve the problem with it because you will spend way too much time computing H star. If on the other hand, you're basically stuck with this particular graph for like next 30 years, it's not that bad to actually do H star. Because all the time you spent on this can be recouped over long future. So somewhere in between, if you're stuck with this problem for a while and you want to do better and you are thinking of something like 8 puzzle, there are these things called pattern databases, which is a generalized way of getting more and more informed heuristics. What that basically says is, so here is the 8 puzzle initial state, here is the final state. Basically, remember final state, everything is in the sorted order. In this particular case, I put the blank at the beginning. You can have different conventions, okay? Now, if you are looking at this and you're comparing it to this, I can compute the number of tiles that are misplaced. You can count them. That means the number of tiles that are in the wrong position corresponding to their final position. You can also compute how much each of them need to travel from their current position to get to their correct position, which is the number of misplaced tiles. I can do a different, and both of those will give you some kind of a heuristic value. I can do a different kind of a thing, which is, look, to get this, which is my final state, I need to make sure that this pattern holds. That pattern holds. Do you understand what I'm saying? So my thing is that, imagine I looked at you now, since I already asked your names, etc. I looked at you, and then now I say, go out. Then I'm trying to put you back in the class. Right? Or maybe you shuffled yourself, you're in the wrong positions. Assume these are your correct positions. you're in the wrong positions. I can do the misplaced students. I can do the sum of Manhattan student heuristic. Those would be sort of loose lower bounds. I can also say, for example, that if I want to get everybody back into their position, into their right position, for example, I can take a subset. Let's say all the men have to be in their right position. So when I'm putting the men in the right position, I'll act as if the identities of the other students don't matter. They are essentially just indistinguishable. I didn't know whether to use this analogy with the men or women. Either way, I'll get into trouble. If I said women are not in the right position, that could be a problem. If on the other hand, I said, the point of this heuristic is the ones that you're not considering, you consider them indistinguishable. So what you're doing in this case is you will ask, how many moves do I need to go from this to any configuration which has 3, 7, 11, 15, 14, 13, 12 in that pattern. That means what happens in the middle, I don't care. Which means I'll actually make them indistinguishable. I'll make them all white. You see what I'm saying? It's a much smaller search space than the full 8 puzzle search space. But it's still much bigger than what you were doing before, which is just counting the number of misplaced tiles or individually counting the sum of the Manhattan distances. Computing these databases is actually, it takes some time. So you basically have to take time off, and essentially what you do is you start from here. It turns out that you start from here, do a breadth first search. And whenever you find a configuration, any configuration for the first time in that breadth first search, that must be the closest that configuration is to this pattern. In doing so, you assume all of these don't have names. You understand what I'm saying? So now heuristic would be this huge, big pattern database. It's a database of patterns which says, if you're in this state, the number is 17. If you're in this other state, the number is 95. How do you know? Well, I spent like a couple of days computing all this stuff. And it turns out if you do this, in fact, doing this is the only way to solve, if you're into the 8 and 15 puzzle problems, the next would be what? After 15 comes what? 25 and then 36. If you have nothing else to do other than solving 36 puzzle problems, you need to do pattern database heuristics. Even your Jensen Huang's GPU machines are not going to help you in computing the probably optimal path. That is a probably optimal number of blanks movements to get one particular configuration into the goal configuration. Now, in this particular case, the bigger the pattern, the more informed the heuristic. Right? In fact, I could have used the pattern which is just get the rightmost vertical column, the rightmost column correct. That would be a sub-pattern of get the down as well as the rightmost correct. You see what I'm saying? So the pattern database corresponding to this pattern will be a smaller pattern database because many more states will be identical because more of these, even these guys will become white. They're indistinguishable now. The reason I'm bringing this up is computing heuristics is essentially figuring out what's the right level of abstraction. And it's not that heuristic should be computable like with, in very short time. What really matters is the time you spent in computing the heuristic and the time you spent in searching basically is minimized. And that can happen somewhere in the middle. Questions on this? Since we are here, let me also mention, you had a question? Okay. Let me also mention this, since we are looking at the heuristics. that here is another kind of a problem where we can talk about heuristics, which is you have irregularly shaped obstacles in the plane and trying to find the optimal path from I to G, some point in this plane to another point in the plane. Okay? The simplest abstraction is imagine that all obstacles have gone away. If the obstacles have gone away, what is the shortest path? Straight line distance, Euler's distance, which is reasonable, but that's like the dumbest idea. So straight line distance in this problem is like number of misplaced tiles and number of the sum of Manhattan distances for the 8 puzzle problem. You want to do better. Because remember this picture, if you are doing straight line distance, you're probably in this region. That means the heuristic is easy to compute, but the search with the heuristic is still too costly, because of which the sum, the green guy, is still pretty high value. Okay? So what are the other things you can do? Well, I can essentially start inscribing these irregularly shaped obstacles into lots of things. Like, for example, I can inscribe circles around them, circles inside of them. I can inscribe generalized polygons in front of them. I can inscribe polygons with many, many more, or B-splines in them. If you do B-splines, when I'm doing this, I'm getting closer and closer to the real shape of the obstacle. And for each of these, then you need to figure out, if I give you like circles, how do I find the distance from I to G? Do you see what I'm saying? So it turns out actually there is a way of doing this, which involves shrinking the circles, expanding the space. I won't go into it right now. Just like computing the pattern database was actually not that obvious. You had to do breadth first search, starting from the pattern, until you find the state. Any state that you first encounter, you consider that state's pattern database value is the depth that you have traveled. Nobody in their right mind would be using breadth first. The whole point of doing A-star search is not to do breadth first. And yet you're using breadth first during heuristic computation. And similarly here, there are ways of computing the distances in these abstract spaces. And if you do that and use those distances as the heuristic value, then the path plans that you find will be closer to optimal. Not only they'll always be optimal, but they'll be found faster. That means fewer number of node extensions. Now, this is basically what Amazon does in the warehouses right now. There are tons of obstacles, basically. There are tons of, in fact, it's not a single robot. There are many, many of these small robots that have basically been there in some place. They have to go to some other packing station. And they should essentially avoid bumping into things and also bumping into people. And they have to quickly find optimal paths. So a generalization of this pathfinding for single agent is multi-agent pathfinding, which is currently being used in Amazon, all warehouses. So that's like an application. Okay? So a question that I have, which you probably, I don't know whether you saw stuff already in the thing, is I spent time inscribing. Why not circumscribe? See what I'm saying? I put circles inside. Why did I put circles around?
Overestimation.
What?
Overestimation.
Exactly. Did you get that guy's point? If you put circles around, I can actually put a really loose circle. Right? Okay, this is an obstacle. The circle for this big. At which point, you say, what is the path from I to G? There is no path. Don't worry. That's my heuristic. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what you thought was an abstract issue, which is underestimate versus overestimate, corresponds to, did you abstract the constraints? Did you relax the constraints or increase the constraints? So when we said heuristics are solutions of relaxed problems, relaxing basically means the constraints are fewer. That means even more paths are possible in this abstract space than are actually possible in the real world. So really a good way of understanding what the lower bound heuristic is saying is allow for more paths than is actually possible in the real world. But don't make it too loose. So suppose in the real world there is a set of 10,000 paths possible. The best heuristic only allows those 10,000 paths and nothing else. The worst heuristic says infinite number of paths, which also includes these 10,000 paths. The stronger heuristics will be closer and closer to these 10,000 paths. If any of the original 10,000 paths, that were actually possible for the real world is being precluded by your quote-unquote relaxation, it's not a relaxation. It's a constraint. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you could do more in the real world than in this quote-unquote abstraction you're coming up with. The abstraction is not a relaxation. That's exactly what happens when I put circles around, because in the colloquial way of looking at putting circles in the obstacles, you think they look both like abstractions. But inscribing is a relaxation. Circumscribing is not a relaxation. It increases the constraints, which means it reduces the number of paths, which means I can always construct an I and G example where the path that you find would be inoptimal. Which is as good a time as any to ask you the following question, which is, why all this nonsense about optimal? Why can't we just make the path and see if it's optimal or not? Do you understand what I'm saying? So why not, I have a search algorithm, which is not guaranteed to be optimal. It is stochastically optimal. That means once in a while when it feels like it will give you optimal solutions. Sometimes it won't. I'll say, okay, maybe 60% of the time it gives optimal solutions, 40% it would give inoptimal solutions. So one idea would be, hey, let me run that search algorithm, look at the path. If it's optimal, I keep it. If not, run the search algorithm again. Do you see a problem with this strategy? These are sanity tests. A lot of people do optimization without understanding. Okay? The insanity of my idea is you don't know what is optimal. You thought it is optimal because the algorithm said so. If you have to find what is optimal, then you need to have a separate uniform cost search running on the side that will tell you what the optimal path is. Then you compare it to what this algorithm did. This is what teachers who have no life do. So we will compute the optimal path and compare it to what you guys are doing. But you can't do this as a normal search algorithm, because then it is a search algorithm. You have this very good A-star algorithm, but it sometimes could be inoptimal, because of which you have to run all the time a uniform cost search anyway in the background. That's like dumber than just using uniform cost search, because you already paid all the money for the uniform cost search, plus you're also running the A-star search. Do people understand this? Please make sure that you understand. It's a pretty low-level point many people don't understand. One of the things about teaching in general is there's this beginning of Anna Karenina. There is this statement. I don't know, any of you have read Anna Karenina? You didn't think that I'll talk about Anna Karenina, but that's the way it is. That all happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. All students who understand what I'm saying are alike. We both agree on exactly the concepts. Every student who misunderstands, including myself when I'm a student, misunderstands in different ways. The problem is not just telling you what is right. The problem is trying to stop you from doing some of the obvious wrong things that people do. That's what makes teaching hard. Because otherwise, I told you the right thing, but if this part doesn't go into your head, you'll say, yeah, of course, I've said this, but when push comes to shove, when my manager says, you must give the optimal solution, I'll say, I'll look at the solution, see if it is optimal or not. That's a dumb idea. It doesn't work. Yes?
So let's say we do circumscribe around the polygons or whatever, and then let's say we use the Amazon warehouse example, right? So if we do that, and if you don't always find a path, but we find it most of the time, why would that be bad anyway? Because the robots kind of run and then.
That gets me to the next point, which is what is the difference between computer science people and hackers? Computer science people are like you. They let me go on and on about what it is needed to get the optimum and say, to heck with it, it looks too much painful. And now most of the time, optimality is not that important. I know how to get it, but I'll just do inoptimal solutions once in a while anyway. So you might say, what's the difference between me and a hacker? Well, the hackers don't know, don't care. They write an algorithm, they write a program, they don't write an algorithm. They have no clue what happens with the program. The cleanest hacker would be, I tried it, it seemed to work. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you bring up a very good point. Despite all the discussion about optimality, most search algorithms that are actually used will use inadmissible heuristics. And you would say, why didn't you tell me all this? We could have wasted like 2 classes. You see what I'm saying? That's because you're computer science students. You know what it is that you want to achieve, because if in fact finding optimal is very cheap and you still did not look for the optimum, then that would be bad. By doing this, you know how costly is it to get optimum. And more interestingly, actually, you can put bounds. You can put bounds on how far you would be from the optimum if you were to use a certain kinds of heuristic, sometimes, certain kinds of inadmissible heuristic. This is what computer science is. Does your manager in your software engineering company care? No, not at all. But then you didn't need to take computer science degree, really, right? You know, all of you guys know that you can watch YouTube videos and hack and you'll be fine. And it's a useful thing to understand. The difference is, we know what heaven looks like, we feel it's too far, and then not go there. The ignoramus hackers don't know, don't care. They say, it looks like something is printing, that looks like a solution. And if you ever do that, you know that you are being a hacker. That's really the difference, honestly. Okay? It's a useful question to ask. Any other question? One of the things I'm doing is sort of brainwash you into kind of looking at the world in a different way than just algorithm 1, algorithm 2, algorithm 3. I want to both tell you that the properties are important and to tell you that they're not sacrosanct. It's not like nobody is going to put you in jail or anything if you don't use those properties. But you know how hard or easy it is. Any other questions? Okay, so this basically we did all this. I would skip all this, go back, and then complete the beginning part in the next 20 minutes. Okay, let's actually look at, maybe start from here. Properties of A-star search. You kind of understand what I'm talking about. You do the search queue in terms of f equal to g plus h, right? And then you do the open list. Basically, you expand nodes whenever you expand the node that has the lowest F value, put its children back onto the open list, resort the open list in terms of increasing F values, and pick always the lowest F value. Okay, you guys saw the A-star search algorithm trace that I asked you to see, right? So you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so is it complete? Yes, unless there are infinitely many nodes with F value less than F of G. This is a very interesting thing. The goal node, the optimal path to the goal node, the cost of optimal path from the start node to the goal node is F of G. Because at the goal node, F of G is G of G plus H of G. One thing you know for sure, if it is a goal node, what should be its heuristic value? What? 0. If the goal node doesn't have heuristic value 0, then you already are inadmissible. Remember, inadmissibility of the heuristic is for all nodes. H of n is less than or equal to H star of n. For every search node, the estimate is less than the true cost. If I make the H value of a goal node non-zero, I already lost admissibility, Okay? So what I'm trying to basically talk about is the completeness is guaranteed if the F value is, there are now not infinitely many nodes with the F value less than F value of the optimal goal node. Why is this important? It is because F value is a real number. This is basically connected to what we were discussing at the end of last class, where I said, why can't we do iterative deepening uniform cost search, just like you did iterative deepening depth first search? The difference is iterative deepening depth first search at most does D iterations, where D is the depth of the goal node. IDA star, basically iterative deepening uniform cost search, as well as IDA star, which is iterative deepening, F value based iterative deepening. Both of them can essentially keep putting one node in that is just more than the current cutoff. And if there are infinitely many such nodes whose F values are less than the optimal goal's F value, then you know, for example, IDA star will take infinite number of iterations. You'll also know that A star search is at that time not guaranteed to complete. Because the way A star search works, I'll get to you. The way A star search works is it will make sure that every node whose F value is less than the F value of the optimal goal node, it would be expanded before it expands the goal node. And remember, the only time you stop is you pick the goal node for expansion. Remember, I made that point. You don't just stop because the goal node is hanging around somewhere in some corner of the open list. It needs to slowly come up. So many times in bad problems, you will realize that the optimal goal is sitting there. But a huge number of bozos were all going to take you in other directions because you can see the entire problem in some cases where you can see the entire problem. All of those happen to have F values less than the good guy's F value, eventual good guy's F value. Because you remember that most of the time you don't know what the optimal goal is yet. So what happens is all of those have to be expanded, and the search algorithm has to prove to itself that the only reason I picked you is there is no other partial path. There is no other goal node whose F value is less than yours. In fact, remember this because I'll use this in a minute as the proof by contradiction of A star search optimality. Okay? Time, it's generally exponential, unfortunately, still. Because in the best case, with H star, it is linear. With H equal to 0, it is just B power D. So the best kind of things that we know is that essentially the time for this would be B power H star minus H by H times D. So the relative error of the heuristic comes into play. So only when H star equal to H would you really get just constant number of expansions, which is the D number of expansions. Otherwise, what you did is you are bending the exponent, like we are doing with COVID. It's an exponential process. You're just bending the exponent. Okay? Space, it keeps all nodes in memory. In the worst case, it can be as bad as breadth first, which means it can take exponential amount of space. However, you know you have a trick up your sleeve. You can do IDA star, where you do depth first in each. So you start with an F cutoff. You take only nodes whose F value are less than F cutoff. And within that part of the search tree, you do depth first search. So here is a trick question that you can ask anybody who thinks they know A star, just so that you can feel superior, which is, how does A star, is A star search used in each iteration of IDA star? Has some variation of that. It looks as if IDA star, iterative deepening A star is being used in every iteration. No. If you use A star in any iteration, space would be exponential. The only technique we know that gives you linear space is depth first search. You understand what I'm saying? So every ID that iterative deepening search will use depth first search in each iteration. The way they differ is how they put the cutoff for the depth limit. IDDFS does it by the depth. IDUCS does it by the G value. IDA star does it by the F value. Okay? Is it optimal? Yep. That's what I want to prove in the next few minutes. It's optimal. In the sense, as long as the heuristic is admissible. That means as long as for all n, h of n is less than h star of n. You are guaranteed that when A star search stops and says, hey, here's the path, you don't have to check if it is optimal. In fact, you can't check if something is optimal. That's something that you have to remember, right? If you have to check if something is optimal, then you don't have any help. Because what is the search algorithm doing? Optimality has to be by construction. So if to prove that A star search is optimal, I can't say, I used A star search on these 15 problems. I already know what the optimal solutions are for these problems. And A star search gave optimal solution in all these cases. Looks like it's good. That's not a proof. What is a proof? You know, anything that you learned in discrete math is a proof. But let me start by showing the two proofs. Let's actually try to understand why uniform cost search, that is A star search with H equal to 0. That means it only uses G. Why is that optimal? You agreed that it's optimal. I never proved it to you. If I intimidate you, I mean, these are, by the way, you remind me, I can send you a list of proof techniques, funny proof techniques. One is proof by intimidation. And there are other kinds of things, proof by mumbling, and proof by citation to eminent authority. I was just passing by, talked to Dick Karp, and he said it's probably NP complete, so it must be NP complete. None of them are real proofs. It's worth remembering these bad proofs so that you know what are proofs. I mean, the closest you may have done proofs is in discrete math. But if you have done like math T11 or something, you would have done proofs. Okay? But the two proofs that we have to do here are actually simple enough. Consider this, follow my argument, okay? So I'm in the, actually maybe just do this. I'm in some start node. I'm doing UCS. And at some point of time, I got to some node NG. And UCS tried to expand it, found it's a goal node. And it said, I'm done. This is the optimal path. I want to argue to myself that this is actually going to hold given the way UCS works. Right? So these are what are called proof by contradiction. This is one particular real proof technique, proof by contradiction. Which is, I will call you a bluff. I'll try to call you a bluff. You are saying, Rao, uniform cause search found this node, and it says it's optimal, so it must be optimal. I am saying that, no, there is this N-G, that is this other node I found. It is actually optimal. That means its G value is less than the G value of NG. That's what my claim is. So my claim is G of NG is greater than G of N-G. Because you said this is the goal node, and I'm telling you there is this other guy I know who is even better G value. That means the optimal path from N0 to this guy turns out to be little smaller than the optimal path from N0 to this guy. So how do we argue this? Okay, that's my claim. So the way I'll argue is that notice that for N0G to suddenly appear somewhere, so in fact, one of the interesting things is the following. If you will ask two questions, is N0G, is N-G on the open list? The two cases, one is N-G is already in the open list. Other is it's going to come. Like Messiah, it will come later. And so you are unnecessarily committing to this bad goal. The first case is easy to disprove, right? If in fact N-G is sitting on the open list, at the time you picked NG, then you would have picked N-G instead of NG. The only reason you didn't pick it is because its G value, because H is 0, so its G value must have been higher than that of NG. Agreed? Otherwise, why would you do it? I mean, unless like the computer greater than less than is misfunctioning, there is no way this will happen. This is easy enough to disprove. The harder question is, what if it is not yet on the open list? It's going to happen. One of these days, after you decided this is the optimal goal and you built an entire foundation on this, you find there's a different optimal goal. It just slowly would have come onto the open list by that time. How do you question that? The way you question that is, there must have been some other node N double dash, which is somewhere in the search tree and on the open list at the time NG was picked. Right? Okay? And it turns out that N-G is a descendant. After a certain amount of additional expansions, N-G came into being. So my beef now is with this N double dash guy. I don't know who this N double dash is. It's like basically, if you're trying to say, my ancestor is better than your ancestor, then I just have to say, basically, consider all possible ancestors you can have and try to compare. So N double dash is some arbitrary ancestor of N-G, which was contemporaneous with NG, like lived with Jesus. Right? But then the poor guy was not picked. Why was he not picked?
You have N logic.
Because G of N double dash is greater than G of NG. That's the only reason it wasn't picked. It's not that there was n double dash racial discrimination of any kind. It was just merit. Okay? Your G value sucks. And so you are not picked. That's why n double dash wasn't picked. But an n dash can say, no, my ancestor was a loser. But I am a winner. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah, I understand. I agree with you that n double dash G value is greater than n and ng's G value. But if you just wait, I could have shown that my G value is smaller. Is that possible? To understand that, this is the cost of G n double dash. This is the additional travel that you did, which is sort of distance of n double dash and n dash G. The only way, if G n double dash is greater than G n G, the only way G n double dash plus distance of n double dash to ng is less than G of ng would be if this number is negative. You get it? So if distances are negative, uniform cost search won't work. And for the distances not to be negative, all the edge costs should be positive. I never said this explicitly, but it turns out that as long as all action costs are positive, you can be guaranteed that this claim cannot hold. So I proved by contradiction that your bluff calling doesn't make any sense, because there couldn't have been anybody else. Either they were there on the open list when I picked this guy, in which case they actually already have a higher G value, or one of their ancestors is, in which case it's actually worse, because your ancestor was already a loser, right? And then you can only be more and more loser. I mean, I'm not talking about human societies. I'm talking about search node societies, where you can never get a better G value than your ancestor if you have positive distances, a positive edge cost. This is the reason why uniform cost search is guaranteed to be optimal. Now, as a corollary, in the next 3 minutes, I will say A-star search is also optimal for the same reason. Because all I would have to do is I have to make these arguments in terms of f. So f of n double dash must have been greater than f of ng, which is g of ng. That's why it wasn't picked. If f of n double dash is greater than g of ng, can f of n dash g be smaller than g of ng? That is not possible, because f is nothing but the g plus h, which is a lower bound. Previously, h was 0. Now, h is something other than 0, but it's still guaranteed to be the lower bound compared to the real distance. You see what I'm saying? Because of which, if you add, basically, if already fn double dash is greater than f of ng, there's no way f of n double dash, n dash g would be better. That's the proof of optimality. And you see how we use the admissibility. We use admissibility by saying, previously we are thinking the rest of the path is 0 cost. Now we are thinking the rest of the path is actually has a cost, but it is less than the true cost. So it will still be less than the distance. That's the point. Distance n double dash to ng, that's a true distance. The h will be less than that. So that's the reason why A-star search is optimal. This idea is called, whatever we did here, is called branch and bound. This is the general idea. So basically, you're trying to find some, like the best whatever, like some best purse or something in a department store, right? You start searching, you find one purse. Its quality in terms of cost and its color and its brand is a certain number. So I have this in my hand. And I continue searching because people aren't saying get done, get done. So you still continue searching. And if you see any other purse or any direction of purses where the overall quality of that direction seems to be less than the quality of the purse you have in hand, there's no point in going in that direction. So A* search basically cuts off big chunks of search space. So remember that when it ended, NG was picked for expansion, and it said, I'm done. The open list at that point of time could have huge number of additional nodes. They're all saying, we are paths too, why aren't you considering us? And I'm saying, you are losers. Given the way H is, if you're already worse than me, that one bird in the hand, the partial paths that are worse than the full path cannot become better. That's the heuristic. That's the insight. A partial path that's already worse than the full path to this guy cannot magically become a better path because the distances can only increase. We'll end here. Okay.